Mr. Chairman, thank you for being with us. I'd like to follow up on that line of questioning for just a minute, because we get into these constant debates here whenever we try to reduce spending at the federal level about whether that's going to cost jobs or whether it's going to cost a decrease in the economy. But don't you believe that at some point Congress has to start paring back the spending?
Certainly, and I've said so many times. But again, we don't have a single-year problem. We have a long-term problem, and it needs to be addressed on a long-term basis.
Several economists talked to the President's Fiscal Commission about this fact, and they talking about the long-term commitment that is needed. Indicated that one of the best things we could do for our economy was to, as a Congress, adopt a long-term plan that made sense and that would show the world economies that we were committed to dealing with our fiscal problems. Would you agree with that?
Yes, Senator. I was the first witness for the Fiscal Commission, and I made basically that point. And to the extent that we can address the longer-term trajectory, which currently is not sustainable, we could ensure lower interest rates, greater confidence, and it would, at a minimum, be helpful to the current recovery, but more importantly, it would protect us from fiscal or financial crises down the road.
And I would just add, as a you don't need to comment on this if you'd like to. I would just add that Congress budgets on a one-year-at-a-time basis, and so frankly, we have to look at the year we're dealing with as we move forward. So although I agree that we have to look long-term, we don't adopt long-term budgets, or at least historically. And some of us are going to try to get us to do that. So thank you very much for your involvement in that process. In the context of the transparency issues that you discussed with us, I'd like to focus for a minute on GSE reform, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac in particular, because I am one who believes that it's imperative that Congress grapple with the need to deal with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and to determine how we will proceed. And I have my opinions on how we should proceed in that context, but at least as a start, I think it's important that we begin what I consider to be honest accounting with regard to the federal obligations represented by Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. In a January 2010 CBO report, it was concluded that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have effectively become government entities in the way that they are now managed. And their operations should be included in the federal budget. Do you agree with that CBO report in that context? In other words, whether the debt obligations of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac should be included in our federal budget?
Well, I'm not an accountant, and I defer to those with better knowledge on that point. But I would just say that if you do that, of course, you would add the debt to the federal debt, but you would also have to offset that to some extent with the assets that the Fannie and Freddie hold. So whether you consolidate or whether you simply take as a charge the obligations that the government has to support Fannie and Freddie, you would still have the same net effect on the government's fiscal position overall.
Yeah, at a minimum, it seems to me that we ought to acknowledge the taxpayer is on the hook for the debt, and we ought to let the American public know what that is. And I fully agree that if we need to also show the assets, so be it. But right now, the American public's on the hook for the debt. We're not necessarily going to be able to obtain access to the assets. It's going to be very interesting to see how Congress moves forward to deal with this. Another question, just shifting subjects for a minute, is do you believe that an explicit inflation target would help to promote the credibility of the Federal Reserve by being explicit about its objectives and help it to anchor inflation expectations?
Well, I have supported this idea for many, many years, and the subtlety is helping everyone understand that by giving a number which would help clarify what the Fed is trying to achieve and would help, we hope, anchor expectations more firmly, that we would not be abandoning in any sense the other part of the congressional mandate to maximum employment. We have moved partway in that direction in that we provide information in our projections about what the committee individually thinks is the best long-run inflation goal, inflation outcome, and that currently is somewhere between 1.5% and 2% on the PCE price index. But we have not gone all the way to a formal inflation target. Again, the communication issue here is to make people understand that this is a way of improving communication in general without necessarily abandoning the other aspect of the other side of our mandate.
Thank you. I see my time's expired.